Mayor Walsh has signed an agreement with the federal government to strengthen the pathway to citizenship for Boston's immigrants. In its agreement with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the city commits more resources for education and awareness. To tell us about the city's policy and the new measures is our guest from the Mayor's Office of New Bostonians. We'd like to welcome the Policy and Communications Advisor, An Lee. Thank you very much for being with us, An.
Thank you so much for having me.
And give me a little more detail about what this new agreement is all about.
Sure. This new agreement, in a sense, formalizes and makes a little bit more clear certain things that we've already been doing to try to make citizenship more accessible, and in another sense, formalizes how much of additional resources that USCIS, the federal government, will be providing for the city in terms of materials to educate people about eligibility requirements and about how to prepare for the exam that they'll have to pass to become a U.S. citizen.
Well, of course, this comes after some other decisions by the mayor's administration about basically policy on immigration, especially the thorny issue of immigrants without legal status. So we have the Trust Act, and we have those deferred action orders from the president. So I guess the mayor is really trying to get in sync on this.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is absolutely consistent with the mayor and the city's position on immigrants from the very start. And this is a tradition of Boston as a city of immigrants for hundreds of years. From Mayor Flynn to Mayor Menino and now Mayor Walsh, we've certainly been more active and more intentional about how we're going about serving our immigrants. But the city is over 27% foreign-born. And we have a responsibility to the people who work here and the people who live here, regardless of where they come from, and trying to make them, fold them in, to make them as much a part of the city as anyone else, because they are as much a part of the city as anyone else.
Well, there are, as a result of the presidential order, new opportunities for people to get their status legalized, and I guess the city has to do some persuading maybe too, because as much as people might want that, they might have some apprehensions too.
Sure, and that's being held up in the courts right now as well. So there's a lot of confusion about what's happening. So what we did was a few weeks ago on May 30th, we had a screening clinic with 110 volunteers, and around 360 people came to get screened to see if they would be eligible for the executive orders that President Obama, the executive actions that President Obama announced last year, or if they might be eligible for something that's already available, but they just simply didn't know about it. And we actually found that depending on how strong of a case they had, up to 40% of the people who attended the clinic actually has an avenue to some other form of relief that they didn't know about before.
Well, for people who haven't had to deal with immigration status in their life, they might think of this is just like getting a driver's license, but for the average immigrant, the complexity, the expense, I guess there's a need for the city to do something here.
We certainly believe so, and we know that what we're doing is only the tip of the iceberg, but hopefully not just through that direct service of screening individuals, but also through public service announcements, educating community-based organizations who work with immigrants, whether they be directed at certain communities or whether by virtue of simply being in a certain neighborhood. East Boston Neighborhood Health Center comes to mind. They serve many immigrants, and so we need to make sure that just the different channels of information are being used as best as possible. And beyond that, we are really concerned about scams. So, there is unauthorized practice of immigration law that happens in communities throughout the United States, and we want to make sure that people aren't being cheated out of their hard-earned money, and that they are getting the accurate information that they deserve to know.
Now, a lot of these scams are probably done maybe by fellow immigrants from the same country, so I guess you've got to get into that language pipeline to make sure you get out the word.
Yes, absolutely. We've been trying to work with ethnic media in a really strong way of trying to get them to run our PSAs in several languages, to run print ads, and to run stories about this issue and how to simply make sure that people get the information they need.
Well, I know immigration is a very politicized, especially along partisan lines, kind of issue, but at the same time, it's about people's economic well-being here, about getting the status, being able to hold a job and drive a car.
Yes, absolutely. Immigrants are a very strong economic driver. Cities throughout the United States already know this. Some cities are realizing it more recently than others. But if you take a look at the major cities in the United States, the policies that the local governments have towards immigrant residents is overwhelmingly positive. We know that immigrants need to thrive, and when they thrive, everyone else thrives as well.
What have you seen, whether it's here in Boston or elsewhere, about civic engagement for immigrant communities? I'm pretty much from around Boston. I think of the Vietnamese community in Dorchester, the increase in engagement, the increase in investment in that part of the city. It seems to go hand in hand.
Yes, certainly. I mean, citizenship, which is what we're promoting today and trying to increase education awareness about, creates a deeper sense of belonging in where you live. And that's what the mayor brought up today. Certainly in the Vietnamese community in Dorchester, there's been more activity around being educated about who's running for office, what sorts of measures are up to be considered by whether it be city council or the state legislature, and whom to support for public office, and being very much more active in that. But that comes with citizenship because there's a vested interest in then voting for those elected representatives.
So what about some of the near future plans to help people with that path to citizenship? Anything that our viewers should know about that's coming up?
Yes, absolutely. In September, we're going to have our second annual Citizenship Day in Boston. It's going to be on September 26th at the Timilty School in Roxbury. We will be disseminating information shortly about how people can find out if they're eligible, call and make an appointment, and then at that clinic, people will be pre-screened before the clinic so that when they show up, they will be assisted in actually filling out their applications and then getting a better understanding of all the steps that follow after they've submitted their application, all the way from there till when they swear in at the oath ceremony.
Should mention if anybody has any questions or things they need help with, is there a way they can get in touch with the Office of New Bostonians?
Absolutely. Our office's phone number is 617-635-2980. Again, that's 617-635-2980 if they have any questions related to immigrant issues generally in the city of Boston. We also have a free immigration legal advice clinic the first and third Wednesday of the month from 12 to 2 o'clock. We get volunteer private immigration lawyers who come in and donate their time and give about 15 minutes of just general consultation on whatever issues that people may have, and that's a first come, first serve. And we always have a Spanish capacity, but we ask that people call at least a week in advance if they need additional language access or any other accommodation.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm Lee from the Mayor's Office of New Bostonians. We'll have more news in just a moment.